चरखा,
अब ये पन्ना कहीं इधर हो गया, लेकिन मैं बता
अपना ध्वज है ना,
चरखा
डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर
जी, 3 रंगों का अपना ध्वज है ना,
किसी ने कहा कि
इसमें ही मंबर थे डॉक्टर
पुराना
अम्बेडकर।
जो चरखे वाला है,
तो किसी ने कहा कि जो पुराना जो चरखे वाला है
ने भी कहा चरखा
यही रख दो
के
झंडा।
अलावा और कुछ हो सकता
बोलते गए डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर ने भी कहा
3 रंग का
चरखा
अपन झंडा मानते हैं कि हमारा
के अलावा और कुछ हो सकता है, तो 3 रंग का अपन झंडा मानते हैं कि हमारा झंडा जो है तिरंगा है। लेकिन उसमें एक चौथा रंग भी है। मसीह साहब ठीक कह रहे हैं, एक चौथा रंग भी है, तो ब्लू कलर का अशोक स्तंभ है ना।
रंग भी है।
तो
ठीक कह रहे हैं।
धम्म का एक प्रतीक उनको लेना था, तो चरखे पे डिमांड चल रही थी। किसी की आई बात के स्वस्तिक कर दो,
एक प्रतीक उनको लेना
हमारा ये
तो चरखे पे डिमांड चल रही
भारतीय संस्कृति के हिसाब से स्वस्तिक अच्छा, बीच में स्वस्तिक था।
है।
अब यहाँ जब चरखा आया तब चरखे पे डिमांड चलती थी कि चरखा ठीक है, 24/7 चलने की बात भी करता है, चरखा ठीक है। और चरखा कई कांग्रेसी चाहते थे और कहते थे महात्मा गांधी का थॉट भी उसमें आ जाएगा।
चरखा ठीक है,
लेकिन डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर खड़े हुए, उन्होंने कहा जी चरखे के अलावा मैं एक सुझाव देता हूँ।
चरखा ठीक है।
उन्होंने कहा वो क्या सुझाव है?
खड़े
उन्होंने कहा
चरखे के अलावा
कि
मैं एक
हमारे
सुझाव देता हूं।
एक दिन में 24 घंटे
वो क्या सुझाव है? खड़े उन्होंने कहा
ये जो हमारे आपका धम्म का चक्र है सम्राट अशोक का,
ये जो हमारे
इसमें
हम
24 चक्र है, 24 वो डालियां, और 24 ही घंटे होते हैं। और हर जो डालिया क्या बोला उन्होंने, डंडिया, उस पे एक गुण है। जैसे एक गुण है प्रेम, एक गुण है दया, एक गुण है करुणा, ऐसे 24 गुणों का जिक्र किया। और नेहरू जी को समझाया, सरदार पटेल को भी समझाया कि ये जो झंडा है ये खाली झंडा नहीं होता है, ये देश का एक प्रतीक होता है। जैसे हमारी करेंसी हमारा प्रतीक है, हमारा झंडा हमारा प्रतीक होगा, हमारा संविधान हमारा प्रतीक होगा, हमारी सेना हमारी प्रतीक होगी, संप्रभुता को रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा ये झंडा। इसलिए झंडे में ऐसा एक चिन्ह दो जो हमारी संस्कृति से भी जुड़ा हुआ हो और लोग उसको लाइक करें। तो उन्होंने कहा क्या है ऐसा, तो उन्होंने जैसे ही अशोक चक्र का जिक्र किया, धम्म चक्र का जिक्र किया और उसको महात्मा बुद्ध से जोड़ा और कहा कि इसमें 24 गुण है। जो मनुष्य झंडे को देखेगा तो उन 24 गुणों को स्वीकार करेगा। मुझे दया आनी चाहिए, मुझे करुणा आनी चाहिए, मुझे प्रेम, मेरे में प्रेम रहना चाहिए, मैं लड़ाई नहीं करूं ऐसा मेरे में गुण आना चाहिए। ये 24 गुणों को वो इंडिकेट करेगा। और ये 24/7 को भी इंडिकेट करेगा। घंटे भी 24 हैं और इसमें तिल्लियां भी 24 हैं। और आप मेहनती नागरिक बनाने के लिए आप इसमें चरखे की बजाय ये अशोक स्तंभ डाल दो। और सारे सदस्यों को एग्री कराया। फिर किसी ने पूछा कि यार ये हो तो चरखा रहा था डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर, आपने इसको ऐसे कैसे डलवा दिया? तो उन्होंने कहा मैं एडवोकेट हूं, मुझे पैरवी करनी आती है, मैं एडवोकेट हूं बेसिकली, मुझे पैरवी करनी आती है। और जब मैं खड़ा हुआ यहां तो मैंने देखा यहां मेरा जो लीगल बैकग्राउंड है वो काम आएगा कि नहीं आएगा। ऐसी जोरदार पैरवी की कि वो झंडे में अशोक जो धम्म चक्र है वो आ गया। और अपना झंडा वैसे तिरंगा है लेकिन रंग 4 हैं साहब उसमें, ये नीले रंग का अशोक चक्र भी है, लेकिन इसको हम ग्रहण नहीं करते। इसमें 24 गुण है। मैं अभी उमा नारायण जी आपको देके जाऊंगा, वो मुझे यहां पन्ना नहीं मिल रहा है। 24 गुण उसमें कौन कौन से हैं? प्रेम, करुणा, दया, कर्तव्य निष्ठा, जो हमारे इसमें डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल स्टेट में है, इसी तरह के गुण है वो 24। तो हमें 24/7 काम करना चाहिए और देश के हम श्रेष्ठ नागरिक बने। झंडे को देकर के भी हमें गुण आना चाहिए। कोई हमें गुरु ज्ञान देकर के हमारे में गुण प्रवेश करवा सकता है, लेकिन क्या झंडा भी हमारे में गुण प्रवेश करवा सकता है क्या? ये भाव अगर किसी ने रखा संविधान सभा में तो डॉक्टर B.R. अम्बेडकर बाबा साहब ने रखा। इसलिए हम एज एन एडवोकेट जो उनके काम है उनका जिक्र कर रहे हैं और ये संविधान में रिफ्लेक्शन हुआ। अब एक चीज मुझे याद आई गई, इसलिए 2 मिनट और लूंगा। एक विषय आया मताधिकार का, तो विषय चला कि इस देश में तो अनपढ़ लोग हैं, इस देश में गरीब लोग हैं, वो वोट का मतलब ही नहीं जानते। ऐसा करो जैसे कोई नगर सेठ है हमारे देश में, वो एक वोट देवे और 20,000 गिन लो। कोई राजा है, वो एक वोट देवे और 50,000 गिन लो। कोई बड़ा राजा है तो एक वोट देवे 1,00,000 गिन लो। ऐसे करके 22 करोड़ के करीब मतदाता थे उस समय। तो 22 करोड़ पूरे हो जाएंगे, सबको वोट मत दिलाओ और महिलाओं को तो दो ही मत। और उस समय तो अमेरिका को भी महिलाओं को लेट मिला मताधिकार, इंग्लैंड में भी लेट, अमेरिका में भी लेट। तो यहां जल्दी क्यों देते हो? तो उस समय डॉक्टर अंबेडकर खड़े होते हैं, या फिर एडवोकेट का काम करते हैं डॉक्टर अंबेडकर, पैरवी करते हैं। जो बोल नहीं पा रहे थे वो संविधान सभा में नहीं आ पा रहे थे, अनपढ़ लोग, गरीब लोग, वंचित लोग, महिला, खाली 15 महिलाएं थी, उन्होंने भी स्वीकार कर लिया कि ठीक है बाद में दे देना। लेकिन डॉक्टर अंबेडकर खड़े होकर के उन्होंने नेहरू जी की तरफ देखा और नेहरू जी को कहा कि पंडित नेहरू थोड़ा मेरी तरफ देखिए। उन्होंने कहा क्या? कि ऐसा मत करिए, पाप हो जाएगा। अडल्ट फ्रेंचाइज, मताधिकार सबके लिए एक साथ करिए। बोला क्यों? कि अभी आप कह रहे थे मुझे 2 घंटे पहले कि मैं एशियन और अफ्रीकन देशों का लीडर बनना चाहता हूं और इंडिया लीडर बन सकता है। तो हमारे बाद जो देश आजाद होंगे अफ्रीका और एशिया के, कुछ नया हम नहीं देंगे तो हमसे क्यों वो ग्रहण करेंगे? आप अगर नया देना चाहते हो तो मैं कहता हूं एक साथ मताधिकार दे दीजिए, गरीब को भी, अमीर को भी, महिला को भी, पुरुष को भी, पढ़े लिखे को भी और अनपढ़ को भी। आप मताधिकार एक साथ करके देखिए, आप बहुत बड़े लीडर बन जाओगे और एशिया और अफ्रीका में पूजे जाओगे। तो नेहरू जी भी समझ में आ गया, यार बात तो ठीक कह रहे। तो तर्क कितने मजबूत थे वकील के नाते कि नेहरू जी भी माने, संविधान सभा के दूसरे सदस्य भी माने और एक साथ मताधिकार मिला सबको, भारत में ही मिला। अदरवाइज तो हो सकता महिलाओं को मताधिकार कोई 10-20 साल बाद मिलता, 30 साल बाद मिलता। उन्होंने कहा एक साथ दो। उन्होंने कहा नहीं क्या करना है, पुरुष जो सोचेगा वही महिला सोचती है। बोला नहीं, महिला अलग से भी सोचती है, गरीब आदमी अलग भी सोचता है। और उन्होंने एक चीज और कही कि नेहरू जी जब ये लोग मताधिकार का प्रयोग करने जाएंगे तो जैसे ये होली और दिवाली मनाते हैं ऐसे ये सेलिब्रेट करेंगे। सब हंसे कि ये क्या कह रहे हो डॉक्टर अंबेडकर। आज मैं देखता हूं जब कभी चुनाव में जाता हूं, कोई ग्रामीण महिला आती है, सच धक कर आती, पूछता हूं कहां जा रहे हो? वोट देने जाऊं। तो वो जो वोट देने जा रहे हैं और सच धक के जा रहे हैं, सेलिब्रेशन के रूप में जा रहे हैं, जैसे होली और दिवाली मनाएंगे, जैसे डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने कहा था, ऐसे आज भारत में जो लोकतंत्र मजबूत हुआ है उसका बड़ा कारण मताधिकार है। मुझे आपने बोलने का अवसर दिया, उसके लिए आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for sharing interesting facts and enlightening us. May I now request Honorable Shri Justice B.R. Gawai to address the audience.
The Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, my esteemed colleagues on the bench in the Supreme Court of India, the Honorable Minister of State for Law and Justice, Shri Arjun Ram Meghwal ji, the Honorable Chief Justices and Judges of the High Courts, registrars and members of the audience. Today is a historic day. It is so because on this day in 1949, we as an independent nation adopted the Constitution of India. But today's date is historic for 2 more reasons. The first reason is that earlier today, the Honorable President of India unveiled the statue of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the premises of the Supreme Court of India. I have no manner of doubt that today's day will be written with golden words in the history of the Indian Supreme Court. I thank and congratulate the Honorable Chief Justice of India from the bottom of my heart for taking the decision to have a statue of Dr. Ambedkar in the Supreme Court. Dr. Ambedkar had famously called Article 32, which provides the right to Indian citizens to approach the Supreme Court, as heart and soul of the Constitution. The statue of Dr. Ambedkar is facing the court number 1, that is the Chief Justice's court. By placing the statue in front of the court number 1, we have paid homage to Dr. Ambedkar as well as reaffirmed his idea that the right to approach the Supreme Court is indeed the heart and soul of the Constitution. Today's day is also historic for a second reason. we are celebrating the centenary of Dr. Ambedkar's enrollment as an advocate. Dr. Ambedkar finished his study of law from Gray's Inn in London in 1922. After his arrival to India in 1923, he had applied for a license to practice law. Dr. Ambedkar had enrolled as an advocate and started practicing before the Bombay High Court in July 1923. The fruits of constitutionalism which we cherish today were sown by Dr. Ambedkar a century ago. I had the fortune of inaugurating a court at Mandangarh in which Dr. Ambedkar's native village, Ambode, which is situated along with the Honorable Chief Justice of Bombay High Court, Justice Devendra Upadhyay. Born into a society marked by deep-rooted social hierarchies and discrimination, Dr. Ambedkar faced adversity with unparalleled challenge and courage. Dr. Ambedkar's writings since 1919 focus on the recognition of equal rights for all the citizens. He emphasized on interconnection between rights, citizenship, and constitutionalism. He theorized citizenship as a bundle of rights, which include fundamental rights and the right to participate in a democracy. Dr. Ambedkar aimed at shaping the discourse of the society through constitutionalism. He attempted to address the social problems through the framework of law and the constitution. It is for this reason that it emphasized on having detailed provisions in the constitution so that there is no scope of arbitrariness in the actions of the decision makers as well as the society. Dr. Ambedkar's constitutional ideas were not limited to lawmakers and judges. He envisaged a public discourse on the values of the Constitution. He had once pointed out that fundamental rights provided by the Constitution ought to be protected by the social conscience of the citizens. That is, the citizens need to respect the fundamental rights of their fellow citizens. Dr. Ambedkar was also a strong proponent of constitutional traditions and practices. He believed that constitutional practices which may not be entrenched in the text of the Constitution are conditions precedent for the successful working of a democracy. He therefore hoped that citizens and constitutional authorities would respect the constitutional traditions. Today, the Supreme Court has also launched a web page on the centenary of Dr. Ambedkar's enrollment as advocate. The web page contains a list of cases argued by Dr. Ambedkar. This web page will act as a source of great knowledge for the common citizens and a valuable resource for scholars and researchers. The most celebrated case in which Dr. Ambedkar participated is the case to enter the Chaudhar tank in Mahad in Maharashtra. In 1923, S.K. Bole, a social reformer, moved a resolution in the Bombay Legislative Council which provided that untouchable classes be allowed to use all public watering places which are built and maintained out of public funds. Thereafter, the Mahad municipality passed a resolution to open the Chaudhar tank for depressed classes. However, the municipality's resolution could not be implemented due to opposition from the oppressor caste of that area. In March 1927, Dr. Ambedkar led a group of individuals belonging to the oppressed caste and drank water from the tank to assert their right of equal access to public resources. This movement is celebrated as the Mahad Satyagraha. However, due to retaliation and pressures from the oppressor caste, the Mahad municipality in August 1927 revoked its resolution to allow the untouchable community to access the tank. Thereafter, Dr. Ambedkar again called for a conference in Mahad in December 1927. However, before the conference could take place, the caste Hindus filed a civil suit for injunction against Dr. Ambedkar and his associates to restrain them from entering the tank. The plaintiff claimed that the tank was a private property. A temporary injunction was granted by the court. Dr. Ambedkar then decided to take up the legal battle, which went on for almost a decade. I am glad that the Supreme Court Judges Library has acquired the original case records pertaining to Mahad Satyagraha and has uploaded it on the web page. In the Mahad case, Dr. Ambedkar, strategically planning his defense, successfully argued that the tank was a public asset and should be accessible to all the segments of the society equally. In its ruling, the Mahad Court ruled that the plaintiffs could not establish ownership of the tank. Both the appellate courts, including the Bombay High Courts, ruled in favor of Dr. Ambedkar. Among other notable cases, Dr. Ambedkar in 1934 successfully defended the All India Textile Workers Conference by exposing the shortcomings in the Trade Disputes Act of 1921. He also provided a legal defense for Dr. R.D. Karve, who faced charges of obscenity for his work Samaj Swasthya, a publication on sexual hygiene. Dr. Ambedkar had several quibbles with the social inequalities prevalent in 19th century India, the evils of which he had suffered greatly. This, however, never made a dent in his zest for patriotism and nationalism. He was a patriotic to the core. It will be apt to quote from his speech made on 17 December 1946 at the Constituent Assembly. And I quote, "While deciding the destinies of nation, dignities of people, dignities of leaders, and dignities of parties ought to count for nothing. The destiny of the country ought to count for everything." Unquote. Furthermore, Dr. Ambedkar was of the firm belief that a constitutional democracy formed on the bedrock of inequality would never truly prosper. In his ironic speech that could not be delivered but was later published, The Annihilation of Caste, he mentioned that an ideal nation can only be built with the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. It is his brainchild that India embraced the trinity of liberty, equality, fraternity into the text of the Constitution. On 25th of November 1949, on presenting the Constitution, he warned that there were a lot of contradictions present in political and social life, and if left unchecked, they would put the foundational democracy of India in peril. In his words, and I quote, "On the 26th January 1950, we are going to enter into a life of contradictions. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we will have inequality. In politics, we will be recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, and one value. In our social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. We must remove these contradictions at the earliest possible moment, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the structure of the political democracy which this assembly has laboriously built up." Dr. Ambedkar believed that we not only need a system of political democracy, but also a social democracy. He said, and I quote, "Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at its base the social democracy." Today, it is essential to recognize that Dr. Ambedkar's mission is far from complete. His ideals remain a beacon, guiding us through contemporary challenges and inspiring us to confront issues of inequalities that still persist in various forms. On this day, the best way to pay tribute to him would be to take a pledge that we leave no stone unturned in giving effect to the dream of Dr. Ambedkar and the other framers of the Constitution of India for ensuring that the country achieves social and economic equality along with political equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for throwing light on Baba Sahib's life and inspiring us. We would like to acknowledge the dedication and artistic skills of Shri Naresh Kumar Kumawat in crafting the sculpture of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in record time, which has been unveiled by the Honorable President of India today in the premises of the Supreme Court. We also acknowledge the tireless efforts of Shri Purnesh Kumar, Project Director, Supreme Court Project and Maintenance Circle, CPWD, for timely completion of installation of this sculpture. I request Honorable Chief Justice of India to give the certificate of appreciation to Shri Naveen Kumar Kumawat and Shri Purnesh Kumar for their commendable work. Thank you, sir. May I now request the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, to address the audience.
My very distinguished colleague, Justice Bhushan Gawai, who since my days is a judge of the Bombay High Court, I fondly referred to as HMJ. I was Mr. Arjun Ram Meghwalji, Union Minister of State for Law and Justice. But let me first begin on a lighter note. I was telling Meghwalji about why I call Justice Gawai HMJ. And the reason is that in the Bombay High Court, whenever you attend a public function, the names of the judges, instead of putting for everybody Honorable Ms. Justice, Honorable Mr. Justice, or everything in Mumbai is in short forms, right? Mahatma Gandhi Road becomes MG Road, so everything becomes in short form because the city is always on the move. So they write HMJ. So when he became a judge, we decided to call him HMJ. So he has continued to be HMJ since the first day that he became a judge and right now. I had a prepared speech really, but I thought, we're in a post-lunch session and we have heard two excellent speeches from Mr. Meghwalji first and then thereafter from Justice Gawai. But thank you all of you for joining in. All my distinguished colleagues are here from the Supreme Court. I know it's really a day of rest otherwise for them that they've all come here, and I sincerely thank all of my colleagues who are here in the audience. Chief Justices of the High Courts who are here, judges of the computer committees. This session is in itself very important, but I think this session is not just about the fact that we have set up the statue, but there is something far more profound in the reason why we have set up this statue and what is going to follow now. In a way, Dr. Ambedkar really belongs to all of us. I think gone are the days when we can say that people called him the leader of the untouchables. He is not a leader of the untouchables. He represents really the entire nation. He represents the voice of the nation. And the more one reflects on the life and times and teachings of Dr. Ambedkar, one realizes that his effort was not just to bring about a measure of social reform or to mobilize his own people for whom he led the cause of social justice, but this was essentially an effort to reform Indian society itself. That's why I always believe that while on the one hand, India is, ever since the time of just Dr. Ambedkar, facing these and witnessing these large social reform movements of mobilization. And we as judges see how our court is being used for engaging in a public discourse on various aspects of marginalization. Yet I always do believe that bringing social justice to the marginalized is not a project of the marginalized alone. Just as I always believe that bringing gender justice is not a project for women or for or those who are in that sense at the receiving end of the spectrum, but it's a project for all of us. And in that sense, I think we are all reforming ourselves and we are healing ourselves in our effort to heal the society. So Dr. Ambedkar didn't really stand away from society. He didn't treat himself as a leader of a community of person, the Bahujan Samaj, which was discriminated against for centuries. But he regarded himself as part of the mainstream of Indian society. And as a part of that mainstream attempted to reform what he regarded was years and years of discrimination. So in that sense, the statue which the Supreme Court has set up today, it represents the abiding quest for equality in our society. Because the most fundamental of values in the Constitution are represented by equality and fraternity. Liberty without equality and fraternity would really be only a hoax. Therefore, it is when you have conditions of equality, when you have a condition of fraternity, that you can truly aspire for true liberty. The setting up of the statue, this afternoon session, originated in a number of conversations which I must acknowledge. I think I've unfairly received too much of the share of the credit since the morning for what has happened this morning. When Mr. Arjun Ram Meghwal became Union Minister, and we have wonderful conversations with him on the state of the judiciary, appointments, transfers, budget, infrastructure, technology, we normally finish our work in about 20 minutes to a half an hour. But thereafter, on a Sunday afternoon, the rest of the 1.5 hours is talking about just society, ideas, vision. And he really put this thought in my mind. He said that Dr. Ambedkar completes 100 years of his enrollment as a lawyer. So why doesn't the Supreme Court plan on doing something on the occasion? I must also acknowledge here the Union Minister was very gracious to ask both Uma and Anurag to stand up. A lot of these ideas have been shaped by my abiding conversations with Anurag. Anurag was my young intern when I was Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court, and Justice Deven Upadhyay is here, Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court. And Deven brought Anurag one day to my chamber at Lucknow and said, I brought my young intern to come and meet you. So I had a conversation with him, and then he interned with me. When I came to the Supreme Court again, he came and interned with me. He thereafter clerked with me in the Supreme Court. Anurag himself belongs to the Bahujan Samaj. Anurag, one thing which I was always very struck by was his wide readership. The amount he read. He had a ton of books when his internship and law clerkship with me came to an end. About 4 or 5 young interns and lawyers in our office, the law clerks, all went with him carrying these tons of books with him. Anurag applied for a scholarship to the Harvard Law School. He was admitted to the LLM program of the Harvard Law School. He did brilliantly at the Harvard Law School and then came back and of course joined as a professor at the Jindal Global Law University. But he and I had a contract, and he said that, well, I'd come one day and come and work at the Supreme Court. And he's now part of our revamped Center for Research and Planning. A very fascinating person I met recently during my travel to the US was a young woman called Disha Wadekar. And Disha belongs to one of those criminal tribes who were criminalized in India, the Pardi tribe. And we know, coming from Maharashtra, what tremendous prejudice that the tribe faces. And she has got admission for an LLM at the Columbia Law School. And I had this very long and sustained engagement with her, and both Anurag and Disha were together at this program which I was invited to deliver the annual Ambedkar Memorial Lecture at the Brandeis University. Brandeis, by the way, has a bust of Dr. Ambedkar. And Disha said something which really struck me in my mind as we were in one of those sessions. And she says, were it not for affirmative action, I would not be here today where I am. Because that has given me a platform to compete on an equal footing. I would also really like to express my deep gratitude to both Justice Sanjeev Khanna and Justice Bhushan Gawai for the statue which has come up. I had just the idea, but honestly, a Chief Justice can implement only something that his colleagues are supportive of. So when I broached it with both Sanjeev and Bhushan in the morning, and I said, well, I've constituted this committee and I'd like you to both get started. The Union Ministry of Culture, which is of course also led by Meghwalji, they gave us all the assistance. We selected the best of these sculptors in the country. And the sculpture has been put up, the statue has been put up in record time. We also had construction workers in the Supreme Court who have worked day and night to install this. When I got videos of the statue being lifted on a crane and installed, I had the worst nightmares. But the crane was very strong, though the statue was also very heavy. It had to be a heavy statue of one of the most distinguished constitutional experts that India has known. My gratitude to the Center for Research and Planning, to Dr. Uma Narayan and to Sukhada Pritam and everyone there. But I'll be failing in my duty if I didn't tell you that the statue was actually put up last night or early this morning at 3 o'clock. The final finishing touches were completed only at 3 o'clock this morning, because we were battling because there were construction restraints in Delhi. So we had to be compliant with all of those activities. And I would like to particularly congratulate my entire team, The Secretary General Atul Kurekar is here. He was here till 3 o'clock last night. Mr. Mahesh Patankar should be here. I hope Mahesh is here. Mahesh Patankar, who worked ceaselessly and was sending me videos all through the night to tell me what is the stage of the installation. So really, this is Mr. Rakesh Sharma, our registrar, who has been looking after this entire one-day event. So I thank all of you, my team, which has done what they have done. In the course of the speech by the President today, the President underlined very important aspects of our profession. And she said, what can we do to make our profession, and by that she meant both the legal profession and the judiciary, more diverse, more inclusive. The purpose of this session in the afternoon, this 1 hour session, is not to just celebrate the installation of the statue and then forget about it until the next case comes up when we refer to the Constituent Assembly debates. I believe this is the beginning of a series of dialogues. And I believe that we will have a series of engagements based on the life of Dr. Ambedkar right through the year now, as we enter into the 75th year of the founding of the Indian Supreme Court. And I thought I'll just highlight a few questions. The Chief Justices are here, senior judges of the High Court are here. First, based on what we have gained as an insight into the life of Dr. Ambedkar, what steps do we take to make our legal profession an inclusive profession? Can all of us say with our hand on our heart that we are an inclusive profession? Or is our profession essentially based on networks? How are young lawyers admitted into chambers? Is there a level playing field for people who come from marginalized backgrounds who are extraordinarily talented but just require a little bit of mentorship? Have we created a legal profession which is truly inclusive? Second, what are the significant obstacles which persons from marginalized backgrounds face when they enter the legal profession? Because these are duties which are cast on all of us, whether we are lawyers, as judges, to ensure that we confront these serious problems. Third, what steps should we adopt to provide diversity in the Indian judiciary? And fourth, what kind of mentorship has enabled those who have succeeded to succeed? We shouldn't just look at it from the negative perspective of what are the obstacles. Obviously, there are people who are succeeding and who have succeeded. Why have they succeeded? Who are the people who mentored them? What are the conditions in which they were able to overcome their conditions of discrimination or prejudice? So I do believe that what we will do now, after we conclude this particular session, is to have a series of engagements, not just on the Bahujan Samaj, but on the broader aspect of marginalization and its interface with the Indian judiciary. And how do we really ensure, what is it that we have to do? Somebody has to take those steps. I'm always asked, wherever I go now, and I've been engaging a lot in public consultations and public engagements, and I'm always asked, why are there not more women in the Indian judiciary? Why is it that you have only so many percent? And we'll see that in the next session as the figures come before you. Why is it that we have only so few women judges in the high courts? Why is it that we have so few women judges in the Supreme Court? There's something which I was in fact in conversation with the President last night. And I always explain to people that, well, in the Supreme Court, we draw upon a pool of available talent, where unlike, say, the American Supreme Court, where you can pick up almost anybody. You can make a senator a judge of the American Supreme Court. We can't make a senator merely because she is a senator a judge of the Supreme Court. You have to have a certain legal background. You have to have a certain degree of attainment in the legal profession. So we have to draw from the available pool. But how do we ensure that the available pool increases in the next 10 years or 15 years? Unless we take those steps now, as we will shortly see in the presentations, and I was actually here the whole day yesterday trying to look at the presentations, you will see that when it comes to the district judiciary, in several states in India, over 80% of the fresh recruits are women. 60% of the fresh recruits are women. 70% of the fresh recruits are women. That's an indicator to you of what is happening on the ground at the lowest levels. That is to say, if you give an even platform, of opportunity to people and treat them as individuals who will be able to succeed without all the trappings which our legal profession gives them or disadvantages them with, they are entitled to and will demonstrably succeed. Now, how do we create those conditions in the legal profession, the mainstream of the legal profession? Is there no obligation on lawyers? We have the lawyers here today with us. And the president of the chairperson of the Bar Council of India is here, President SCBA is here, Secretary of SCBA is here. So many lawyers are part of this session. In fact, the Dalit lawyers in the Supreme Court came to me the other day and said that putting up this statue is an act of enormous support for our community, because it highlights the fact that we are not really behind the scenes, but we are a vital force in the decision-making process of the Indian judiciary. These are some of the things which I thought I would highlight. In the US Supreme Court, I wanted to focus on one particular aspect. Just this summer, the American Supreme Court dealt with a case called Committee for Admissions to Harvard. And they sought to challenge the use of race as one of the criteria in affirmative action programs. The American Supreme Court, speaking through Chief Justice John Roberts, held that the color of your skin or your race should have nothing to do with your right to seek admission. And they've outlawed completely the use of race as even a factor in admissions. They never had quotas, but they would use race as one factor in admission decisions. Even that has been outlawed in the United States. Look how far and how progressive our law has been. We regard equality not merely as equality in a formal sense, but we regard equality in a more substantive sense. And therefore we believe, along really the legacy that Dr. Ambedkar has conferred upon us, that if you have to bring about true equality in society, you must factor in all those factors which lead to the loss of a level playing field. People from marginalized backgrounds do not have the kind of social capital. They do not have the kind of cultural capital. They do not have the kind of access to resources. Something as simple as access to coaching centers when you're appearing for the common law aptitude test. People from marginalized backgrounds are not as conversant with English, but our CLAT examination, which is a bedrock for entry into the legal profession, is entirely conducted in English. Now, by the very fact that the medium of the examination is in English, we are making our profession urban-centric, and it is wholly and completely biased against those who come from rural backgrounds, from marginalized backgrounds. What do we do as a profession to overcome this? I'll give you just one example of what the Supreme Court did recently. We have a clerkship program in the Supreme Court. It's an extremely vital tool for young members of the legal profession from all over the country for the purpose of their own advancement in life. What used to happen was that the clerkships typically, I know of a time in the Supreme Court when clerks were taken only from the National Law School. So if you didn't belong to a National Law School, you couldn't clerk with the judge of the Supreme Court, which I thought was extraordinarily discriminatory. In fact, part of our clerkship program was dealt with by Justice Rajiv Shakdar when he delivered judgment and said that what your people are doing is completely violative of Article 14. But we took the next step. Actually, I prepared a white paper last year, placed it before Chief Justice Ramana, and then eventually we have implemented it this year. And that committee also consisted of several of my very distinguished colleagues, headed by Justice Kaul. We have now completely reoriented our clerkship scheme so that clerks, we have an examination for recruiting of law clerks in the Supreme Court. This year we held the examination in over 20 centers all across India. After we held the examination was held in two parts. There were multiple choice questions as first part of the examination. Then we gave them brief judgments, which were again mock judgments, to prepare a research note. Not more than a few hundred words, so it's something which they had to write in half an hour or 30 minutes. But the exam went on for the whole day. And the final aspect was a research note which you have to prepare for a judge. All this had to be done in the course of one day. We got some amazing people whom we have recruited, and we have allowed our judges then to interview those from the pool. We still give our judges a choice of selecting a few law clerks of their own, but the brunt of the law clerks come from this. The Supreme Court, in conjunction with the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, has launched an internship program. The National Commission for Scheduled Tribes had approached me and said, why is it that our tribal students don't have access to the highest court? So we have engaged with the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, and we are now engaging in a very modulated and a properly structured internship program. So I would really, the reason I thought I should talk more in practical terms as opposed to something very theoretically constructed around the life of this distinguished scholar, statesman, Constituent Assembly member, minister, and the architect of the Constitution and social reformer, is that I thought that we must all dwell today, since all the Chief Justices are here, senior judges of the High Courts are here, we must all reflect today on what we need to do to make the legal profession truly more inclusive. Just a couple of things on a little bit of a few pieces of anecdotal evidence about the life of Dr. Ambedkar. My father used to tell me that as a young lawyer, there was a cafe in Kalagoda in Mumbai called the Wayside Inn. The Wayside Inn later on became very well known among lawyers for a variety of other things. But in those days, Wayside Inn was where there was one gentleman who would sit there every afternoon writing furiously. He would have sheets of white paper and he would be furiously penning something. Later on, people realized that this was nobody else than the chairperson of the drafting committee, Dr. Ambedkar, who would sit in the Wayside Inn every afternoon, writing out what he believed was the structure of the Indian Constitution. Justice Gavai spoke about the Mahad Satyagraha case. A very interesting case, actually, which I thought I must refer to all of you and then conclude what I have to say for the concluding part of this session. And that was a case which Dr. Ambedkar lost, not a case which Dr. Ambedkar won. Mahad Satyagraha, he succeeded. But all of us know as lawyers that it is as much in the cases which you lose that you get the greatest satisfaction as opposed to the great cases which you have won. And this was a case where he defended Professor R.D. Karve's journal called Samaj Swasthya on charges of obscenity, defending R.D. Karve. And Ambedkar mounted a spirited defense of the Gujarati journal which dealt with questions of sexual hygiene and family planning and proposed a legal test for obscenity which was way ahead of its times. Ambedkar lost the case, but eventually he successfully got the magistrate to admit that the taboo around sexual matters should end. So look at the vision, look at the depth of his understanding of society. Another case which he represented involved the defense of Philip Spratt, a British communist who was arrested on charges of sedition. There's a very interesting article on Dr. Ambedkar's life by Rohit Dey, a historian at Yale, in his paper called Lawyering as Politics, the Legal Practice of Dr. Ambedkar. And he says that Dr. Ambedkar's ability to be at equal ease defending the civil liberties of communists, Congress workers, landlords, indigents on death row, within the limits of colonial law required a particular kind of deftness, making him one of the earliest precursors to Indian civil rights lawyers. Ultimately, Dr. Ambedkar was asked that what would he like to do if he were to turn the clock back? In 1956, 30 years after he began his law practice. And Dr. Ambedkar said something which has not been widely quoted. I'll quote that and I'll be ending my presentation this afternoon. And he said, legal practice and public service are the alternating currents in my life. He said they are the alternating currents in my life. I do not know on which current my life will end, whether AC or DC. So as we celebrate 100 years of his enrollment as a lawyer, there can be no doubt that in each role that Dr. Ambedkar played, be it legal practice or public service, he has left strong currents that continue to power our polity. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Justice. It's always a pleasure hearing you. You've been so very instrumental in sensitizing us towards significant aspects of inclusivity, gender, and diversity. Thank you, Chief. Well, as we come to end of this session, I thank everyone present here. We will be starting with session 2 in few minutes. Thank you so very much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yeah. We'll be starting with session 2.
नेहा लंच फिर से
आएगा मतलब डैंड्रफ वापस
फिर से आलू पराठा
डैंड्रफ वापस आया मतलब सस्ता शैम्पू महंगा पड़ गया। ले आओ हेड एंड शोल्डर्स, ये रखे आपको 100% तक डैंड्रफ फ्री। अब डैंड्रफ महंगा नहीं पड़ेगा, गारंटी।
Hi, and welcome everyone to our 10th colloquium for the Good Governance Academy. I see you all coming in online now. Hi, Baba. Very nice to see you online. I know you're one of our regular attendees at the colloquium. Today, we have opened up the reactions. So if you are happy with what people are saying, please let us know. Show how you feel about what they're saying. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Excellent. Thank you so much. Please let us know where you're from. There are lots of people online today from all over the world. So in the chat function, just let us know where you're from. We have a couple from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana. Wow, Southern Africa is really getting represented here. Oh, all